President Buhari to present 2019 budget next Wednesday. Reps threaten boycott. Governor to meet with President Buhari over new minimum wage. Hope for resolution before next year. In international news, a 7-year-old Guatemala girl dies of dehydration and shock in U.S. custody. And in sport, Flying Eagles to battle South Africa, Burundi, Niger for World Cup tickets.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. President Buhari is scheduled to present the 2019 budget next Wednesday, but members of the House of Representatives had threatened to boycott the session. The threat was a reaction to some remarks on them attributed to the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Senator Udo Udoma, accusing the legislature of stifling efforts to delay the budget, saying they have not given them a date. Members who were livid with the minister said he deliberately lied against them to bring the institution of the legislature to a state of disrepute and ridicule, and subtly cover up the incompetence of the executive arm. House Speaker Yakubu Dogara said if the minister fails to apologize and retract his alleged statement before Tuesday next week, the House would have to take a decision in the matter. The Minister of Education, Malam Adamu Adamu, has confirmed President Buhari is in support of the proposed new retirement age of 65 years for teachers. The minister said this was done as a means of improving the standard of basic and secondary education in the country. He was speaking at a public hearing on the need to insulate teachers from the retirement age for public servants organized by the House Joint Committee on Basic Education and Public Service. The Chairman House Committee on Basic Education, Zakari Muhammad, said the bill has been considered for passage. Muhammad says the bill seeks to absolve teachers from the public service rule, which sets the retirement age for government workers at 60 and set for teachers a new retirement age of 65. Stakeholders present at the hearing to support the passage of the bills were the Parent Teachers Association, PTA, Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, Nigerian Teachers Institute, and the Universal Basic Education Commission. The Nigerian Governors Forum has decided to meet with President Muhammadu Buhari again over the issue of the new minimum wage. The forum took the decision at its last meeting for the year, presided by the Chairman of Forum and Governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari. The governors had offered to pay 22,500 naira, while the federal government wants to pay 24,000 naira. Organized labor had insisted on 30,000 naira. At the meeting were governors of Edo, Lagos, Osun, Kaduna, Kwara, Kano, Plateau, Kebbi, and Gombe states. Governors of Bauchi, Benue, Adamawa, Rivers, and Nasarawa states were represented by their deputies. The federal government has filed a $1 billion lawsuit against Royal Dutch Shell and ENI in a commercial court in London on Thursday in relation to a 2011 oil field deal in Nigeria. The two oil majors are involved in a long-running corruption case revolving around the purchase of Oil Prospecting License 245. OPL 245 is one of the biggest sources of untapped oil reserves on the African continent, with reserves estimated at 9 billion barrels. It is also at the heart of the ongoing corruption trial in Milan, Italy. Milan prosecutors alleged bribes totaling around $1.1 billion were paid to win the license to explore the field, which had never entered into production because of disputes. Nigeria has already filed a London case against the U.S. bank Up Morgan for its role in transferring more than $800 million of government funds to a Tate, who has been convicted of money laundering. The All Progressives Congress Reconciliation Committee for the Southwest has met with Governor Ibikunle Amosu in Lagos on Thursday. The committee at the meeting concluded its scheduled interactive session with aggrieved party members from Ekiti, Lagos, Ogun, Ondo, Osun, and Oyo states. Governor Shetima led members to a closed-door session with Amosu to resolve the crisis presently rocking the APC in Ogun State. Major stakeholders of the party in Lagos State, including Governor Kumi Ambode APC governorship candidate Babajide Sanwo-Olu, state chairman of the party, and members of the Governor's Advisory Council were all present at the opening of the committee's meeting. Presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, Donald Duke, says there was no need for the peace accord currently being signed by presidential candidates. He said there were enough laws in Nigeria that made provisions for punishment for electoral offenders. Duke, a former governor of Cross River State, spoke at a public presentation of a book titled The Coming Revolution, a Manifesto for National Greatness, written by Professor Iyowese Harper. The SDP presidential candidate stressed that a continuous migration of Nigerians to other countries in search of greener pastures has made them endangered species, not just to the neighboring countries, but the world. If you don't have electricity, it is not the federal government's problem. This were the words of the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatude Fashola, while speaking at the Next Year Power Dialogue on Wednesday night in Abuja. Fashola reminded them that it was not the federal government's problem if citizens of the country do not have electricity, especially since the sector was privatized. Fashola responded to claims that he once said a serious government would fix power sector challenges within 6 months. The minister explained that the comment was made during the inauguration of the Lekki Independent Power Project when he was the governor of Lagos State, adding that his statement had to do with the connection of residents of Lekki to the IPP within 6 months if the state government had received approval to do so. Coming up, African stories. Kenya beats other countries to install solar system at airport. And international news, a 7-year-old Guatemala girl dies of dehydration and shock in U.S. custody.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby. We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward. Wait, stop. You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down, keep walking to the left, yes. You're almost here. Keep going. You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News, the news across Africa. Hundreds of lawyers and doctors in Tunisia have gone on the street to protest against the new law that will force them to disclose their salaries as part of a government bid to raise taxes. The North African country is under pressure from foreign donors to increase tax revenues to cut a budget deficit. Parliament passed a bill on Monday that allows the government to force doctors and lawyers to disclose salaries. Currently, professional secrecy rules protect both professions from doing this. Officials say some use those rules to avoid paying tax by understating their actual income. Some lawyers staged a brief strike in several courts on Monday. A government official says the law will create more tax transparency and ensure justice if doctors and lawyers paid their fair share of tax. Kenya is now the first country in Africa to demonstrate the willingness to operate an environment-friendly airport by installing a solar system to reduce aviation carbon emissions by planes during takeoff. MOI International Airport now has a ground-mounted 500-kilowatt solar power generation facility, which is expected to reduce at least 1,300 tons of carbon emissions. To do that by providing preconditioned air and compatible electricity that runs on solar energy to aircraft during ground operations. Currently, planes use the auxiliary units that is powered by jet fuel or airport diesel ground power units to run on board systems and cooling before departing for the next flight. Uganda's plan to produce the first oil from resources in the west of the country within 3 years could be delayed. Pipeline investors say they want an increase in the fees for transporting the crude. In 2016, Uganda opted to build a pipeline to transport oil from the region around Lake Albert to the port of Tanga in Tanzania, saying it was more cost-effective than the original scheme to export oil from Lamu in Kenya. Uganda has discovered more than 6 billion barrels of oil, which is being developed by Total of France, Chinese Energy Group, and the Irish firm Tullow. The oil companies are funding 1/3 of the cost of building the 1,400 kilometers pipeline. They have asked for a higher fee despite an existing agreement to cap it at $12 per barrel. The demand will test governments because it fears higher transport costs would undermine profits from selling the oil to customers abroad. The issue could delay the first oil export plan for 2021. UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said in a statement on Friday that Democratic Republic of Congo's government must halt electoral violence and inflammatory speech ahead of the country's long-delayed presidential election scheduled for next week. She expressed deep worry about the reports of excessive use of force, including live ammunition by security forces against opposition rallies. In an already tense electoral environment, she urged the governments to send a clear signal that threat and violence against political opponents will not be tolerated. The United States has demanded an immediate end to violence in Cameroon and a speedy start to talks between the government and Anglophone separatists without precondition. U.S. Deputy Ambassador Jonathan Cohen told the Security Council security and humanitarian condition in Cameroon's English-speaking northwest and southwest regions have significantly deteriorated. Hundreds have been killed in English-speaking regions in months of fighting between the military and separatists who claim they are marginalized in the largely French-speaking country. Cohen said the violence must stop now, calling all sides to reject violence, restore peace, and resolve their grievances through political dialogue. He said escalating violence is obstructing the delivery of humanitarian aid to more than 400,000 internally displaced persons. It is also set to impede education and health access to children in rural areas. And back to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there's a miracle baby. A 6-day-old infant girl admitted to an Ebola treatment center days after birth has now recovered from the virus. The baby is now the world's youngest survivor of what the WHO calls the world's second deadliest Ebola outbreak. She was discharged from a hospital in the conflict-ridden northern city of Beni on Wednesday. She had received around-the-clock care for weeks. Her mother had died of Ebola during childbirth. Health authorities call the baby a young miracle. When we return, international stories. A 7-year-old Guatemala girl dies of dehydration and shock in U.S. custody. And later sport, Flying Eagles to battle South Africa, Niger, Burundi for World Cup tickets.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow this story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and foreign news. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has confirmed that a 7-year-old girl from Guatemala has died of dehydration and shock hours after she was taken into U.S. Border Patrol custody on Thursday. The girl and her father had been detained by immigration authorities a week ago in the state of New Mexico as part of a group of 163 people who approached U.S. agents to turn themselves in. The Washington Post reported the next day in custody, the girl started having seizures and emergency responders measured her body temperature at 105.7 degrees. She was taken to the hospital where she died. Head of the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees Customs and Border Protection, will appear before the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee next week. Jerry Nadler, the top Democrat on the panel, said on Twitter, quote, "Will be demanding immediate answers to this tragedy," end quote. This summer, the Trump administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy, which resulted in separating children arriving at the border with their parents, caused a national outcry. The policy was mostly reversed. The shooter who killed 3 persons at the Strasbourg Christmas market in France has been shot dead by police. 29-year-old Sheriff Chicot had been on the run since the attack in the city on Tuesday. French Interior Minister Christopher Castaner said in a tweet that the police had apprehended a man they believed to be Chicot. He said when police went to arrest him, the suspect started firing on officers. Castaner said police returned fire and killed him. Police have been combing the streets of the city in the east of France and had manned checkpoints on the German border in the search that began on Tuesday night. Strasbourg mayor had described the attack as an act of terrorism. More than 700 police took part in a manhunt for Chicot. French and German police manned controls on either side of the Europe Bridge, which spans the frontier running along the Rhine River, causing hours of logjams. Calm will surely return to Strasbourg streets now that the attacker has been neutralized. U.S. senators did not mince words on Thursday as one after another they voted against Saudi Arabia and delivered a stern rebuke of President Donald Trump, who has unyieldingly supported Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Bin Salman, who has been implicated in the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A resolution was passed in the Senate on Thursday seeking to assert Senate oversight of the Trump administration's foreign policy and the relationship with Saudi Arabia. The Senate also recommended an end to U.S. assistance to Saudi Arabia for the war in Yemen. Another resolution blamed Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for Khashoggi's death. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who had been very vocal in his rebuke of the Crown Prince from the beginning, had said the Crown Prince is, quote, so toxic, so tainted, and so flawed, end quote. U.S. intelligence officials had concluded that bin Salman must have at least known of the plot, but Trump has repeatedly praised the kingdom. A second Canadian citizen has been detained in China. This latest action has elevated fears that Beijing is retaliating against Ottawa for the arrest of Chinese telecoms executive Meng Wanzhou. Entrepreneur Michael Spavor, a prominent consultant on North Korean business issues and one of the few Westerners to have met Kim Jong-un, disappeared in China on Monday, the same day that Beijing detained former Canadian diplomat Marco Kovrig. Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland revealed on Wednesday that Canada had lost contact with a second unnamed citizen in China after he contacted diplomats to report being questioned by the authorities. Beijing has not explicitly made the link between the detention of the 2 men and Huawei executive who was arrested at Vancouver Airport 2 weeks ago. She has been bailed by a Canadian court while she awaits an extradition hearing to the U.S. Winning the Conservative Party confidence votes notwithstanding, British Prime Minister Theresa May still has a lot of fires to put out in what many call the Brexit debacle, and EU leaders are not helping or lending a helping hand. The Prime Minister's hope that EU leaders will help her push a Brexit deal through Parliament had been dealt a severe blow. The Prime Minister headed to Brussels for a winter summit with a promise to push for legal assurances that the Irish backstop would only be temporary. But after making a personal address to EU 27 leaders in an afternoon meeting on Thursday, the leaders let her down. They said there would be no more room for renegotiating the deal she had already got. This response would almost certainly irk her naysayers in her own party. The more than 100 MPs who voted against her in the confidence vote. She also has the full Parliament to worry about. Getting the Brexit deal through Parliament in its present form would prove to be a daunting task. Up next, sport. Flying Eagles to battle South Africa, Niger, Burundi for World Cup tickets. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it not for your hand, that's Palasa phone.
Welcome back. In sport, the Flying Eagles of Nigeria are drawn with the host country of the 2019 Africa Under-20 Cup of Nations, Niger, with South Africa and Burundi. Niger has met with Nigeria and played a goalless draw at the ongoing Waffle Cup in Lome, Togo. South Africa won the COSAFA Under-20 title, beating Zimbabwe 4-3 on penalties, while Burundi are making their first appearance in the competition since 1995, when Cameroon beat them in the final. Nigeria is the most successful team in the history of the competition, having won 7 titles. The European giant AC Milan would be cut off from European competitions next season if they fail to break even after falling victim to UEFA's financial fair play regulation. AC Milan have been investigated for breaching UEFA rule that forbids the club from spending more than they generate. After winning an appeal at the Court of Arbitration for Sport early this year, with UEFA banned from the Europa League, Milan were crashed out of the competition on Thursday night by Olympiacos. They lost 3-1. That is it in news this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a great weekend.